be disagreed to, and I call the member for Griffith.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. In my first speech, I said it was clear that big corporations and billionaires run Parliament. Well, it became clear over the course of these months, negotiating with the government, that Labor is so committed to a weak target, so committed to the profit margins of coal and gas corporations. They are willing to let their entire climate legislative agenda fail just to protect their profits. And I've been thinking a lot about why that makes me so angry, apart from the obvious. And I think it has become clear over the course of today, watching the speeches, that the real disgrace is that the government and the opposition know. They know the consequences of their actions. They know the human and environmental devastation wrought by climate change. They know that people have and will continue to die in floods, heat waves, droughts, terrible natural disasters, storms. They know the massive crop failures, the displacement of billions of people, the deaths of the Great Barrier Reef. They know the consequences of their actions. But given the choice between ordinary, everyday people and billionaires like Gina Rinehart and Clyde Palmer, they chose the profit margins of billionaires. They chose the profit margins of billionaires. And what is really deeply distressing is we know who will pay as a result of this. When the floods hit in Brisbane early this year, and we spent the week going from house to house to house with ordinary everyday people, volunteers, cleaning out people's flood-ravaged homes, time and again it was poor working-class renters, people who had almost nothing, as we dragged their possessions from under their house. And time and again we knew that the reason we were dragging that stuff from under their house, the reason they didn't have enough money to replace their basic possessions, the reason that they knew they'd be sleeping on a friend's couch for the next 3 weeks because they didn't have another home to move into, is because time and again the profit margins of fossil fuel corporations are chosen over the lives of ordinary people. We know there are gas corporations in this country right now who are making billions of dollars in profit and not paying a single cent in tax. Single cent! There are workers who work for those corporations who may pay more tax than the CEOs and the owners of those corporations. Now, we know that the only reason this bill has anything of substance in it is because of the nearly 2 million people who voted for the Greens this election, because of the thousands of people who knocked on doors, who delivered leaflets and letterboxes, who helped clean up after the floods, who staffed polling booths, who built this Greens movement. And my message to you is, while this is still not enough, clearly, your power is not yet fully realised, and we know we've got a long way to go. We know that we will manage to ensure that this bill is Dutton-proofed. We know now that 43% is just a minimum target. We know there is the potential to ratchet it up over time. We know now that we've made it harder for coal and gas projects to be approved, now that we've included some government agencies in the target. We know there'll be greater transparency. And we know that, finally, the government's at least willing to talk to us about supporting coal and gas communities. That it had to include in part of our negotiations that we need to talk about supporting coal and gas communities with the Transition Authority is all you need to know about the contents of those negotiations. We improved a weak bill, but of course, when you're fighting the coal and gas industry and their political representatives, you don't win overnight. Australia remains the third largest, biggest exporter of fossil fuels in the world, and with 114 new coal and gas projects in the pipeline, it's only going to get worse. Indeed, just one of these new coal and gas projects could wipe out the very small reductions achieved in this bill. As the member for Melbourne said, the government's position is completely untenable, even within the realms of in terms of their own debate. Now, let's be very clear. One of the biggest lies in Australian politics, as I've said again and again, is that the major parties support coal and gas and new coal and gas because they care about workers. If that was the case, if they really cared about workers, they wouldn't be also passing the stage 3 tax cuts that will cost $224 billion. If they cared about workers, they wouldn't be allowing gas corporations to walk off with our wealth, take it overseas into the shareholders in Switzerland and France or wherever else these billionaires and shareholders live. If they really cared, a coal and gas worker wouldn't be paying more tax than the multinationals that they work for. If that was the case, the government wouldn't be arriving to a budget in one of the worst cost of living crises in our history, where people are being evicted onto the street because there's no home to move into because the government hasn't built enough homes, either at a state or federal level, for decades now, And they wouldn't be about to spend billions of dollars in the subsidies for the coal and gas corporations who happen to also be destroying our lives. I am sick already after 2 weeks of being misplaced that we are told again and again that we have to be reasonable, that we have to, really just, come on, tone down a little bit. As if I have to think about what millions of lives that will be destroyed as a result of the decisions that are too often made in this place and be calm and reasonable about it. God, I'm already so sick of it. And what we know is that there is an alternative. Massive investment in publicly owned renewable energy, massive investment in new industries, taxing those coal and gas operations as they phase out over the next 10 years and using that to invest in public schools and hospitals, public facilities like public pools, new public parks, beautifully designed public housing. The wealth in this country exists to make sure that not only we can phase out of coal and gas, but we can ensure everyone has a chance to be alive in the sunshine. Where I'd like to finish is this. If there's one thing that this election demonstrated, one thing, is that when ordinary people work together, knock on people's doors, organise in their communities and offer that vision, that alternative vision of making sure that everyday people are put first, we win. The result in Griffith and Brisbane and Ryan and Adam, the member for Melbourne seat in Melbourne, is a demonstration that when we get organised on that platform, we win. And that is a line in the sand. That is a message sent to every member in this House that if you continue on this path, we will run campaigns like in those seats, in your seats, and we will win. And even if it takes those few extra years, we're going to keep organising, we're going to keep fighting, because, as I've said again and again, we don't fight for self-interest, we don't fight for corporate donors, we fight for each other. And time and again in history, the power of collective action, the power of ordinary people working together has won, and I truly believe that over the next few years it can win again. Thank you.